All right, we're back. All right, here we go with another live. It seems like an excessive amount this week. But it just so happens that a lot of stuff happened this week. So we're here again. This is like our fourth live this week, started from nothing, and now it seems like we're going live all the time. Part of this is because the person that edits and posts the video is not here, so we can't really do recordings, take the time to edit them and post them. So a lot of it's coming out as lives. So the Derek Chauvin sentencing hearing happened today. A lot went down in that sentencing hearing. We're going to break down and talk about what the witnesses said, what effect it had on the judge. And then I really want to get in the comments about whether or not you guys agree with the judge's sentence in this case. We've been talking so much about Ronnie O'Neal and how the jury had a decision to make in that case. And it's a much different process when the jury is determining the sentence. And it's very unusual for a jury to administer a sentence, right? So Priscilla Pie here from Southern California. I bet it's beautiful there. So when we talk about most cases in Florida, the majority of cases, the sentence is determined by the judge. And there's a number of reasons for that. But the main one is, and something we'll talk about in this case, is the judge knows, and they have a bank in their mind of all sorts of cases and what the sentences are and facts are in all those other cases. And they can compare a case that comes, there's another case, sorry, I'm reading some of the comments. I'm going to play the clip of what Derek Chauvin said in his sentencing hearing. So stay tuned for that. We are going to actually play that clip. But, you know, when judges are supposed to kind of have a better understanding of what's fair under the circumstances. A lot of people have had a lot of problems with sentences handed down by judges. I remember when that, I don't know why this one always sticks out to me, but the Stanford athlete that raped someone in a back alley basically one night, got a slap on the wrist, and a lot of push for sentencing reform happened. Additionally, when the drug crimes and the nonviolent crimes had these long prison sentences, a lot of people called for prison reform and sentencing reform back then. So we'll see what people are going to say about this sentence in the Chauvin trial. But before we get to the sentence, let's talk a little bit about the motion for new trial that was also decided on in this hearing. And it kind of got lost because everybody wanted to know what the sentence was. Everybody wanted to hear what the family was going to say and what evidence was going to be provided. We've done podcasts and videos on the sentencing phase before. So if you want to know more about that, you can check those out on our page. But generally what happens at a sentencing hearing is witnesses are actually called to talk to the judge and tell the judge why they think it should be a higher sentence or a lower sentence. But like I said, before we get there, let's talk about the motion for new trial. So Chauvin's lawyers basically had three main arguments in that motion for new trial that we've talked about and broken down in detail. Prosecutorial misconduct. It was an unfair trial because the judge did not allow a change of venue, and the George Floyd death, he thinks, made it impossible for his client to get a fair trial in that venue. And then number three, which we've also talked about extensively on this channel, and that's the Brandon Mitchell juror misconduct. And the lawyer said for Derek Chauvin that because he did not disclose that he went to that MLK march, he lied on his questionnaire, and therefore he was not a fair juror, and he could have impacted the other jurors. Therefore, Derek Chauvin deserves a new trial. The judge just outright denied his motion for new trial, denied all three motions, denied that there was any misconduct by anybody. And so we moved into the sentencing phase. Now, what's going to happen next in the appellate process is they will appeal it to a higher court. So Derek Chauvin is not done with appeals. They are going to take this up higher. It always didn't really make sense to me, even as a lawyer, that you do a trial in front of a trial judge and then you appeal to the trial judge to say that something was unfair that he allowed to happen in his trial. So that's kind of weird to me. That's weird thinking to me that you're going to ask. It's like saying, you know, you make a decision. Just pick somebody here, Priscilla Pie. You make a decision and I come and say, well, let me ask you again. I think you made the wrong decision. And you get to decide whether or not you made the wrong decision. Now, it does happen that sometimes judges overturn their own decisions and they change their mind or see something that happened that was wrong, but it's very unlikely that those types of motions for new trial are granted. So no surprise here that that was denied. So we moved into the sentencing phase. And to set up the sentencing phase, let's talk about what he was actually looking at and what everybody was asking for. So first, it seemed as if the maximum penalty he could get was 40 years. Okay. So knowing that, it might be surprising to some that the prosecutors were actually asking for 30 years. And that should indicate that this wasn't a max type of case from the beginning. Even the prosecutors weren't asking for the max. Okay. So I think that's an interesting just mindset of where this case was going, what the facts were, how aggravating it actually was, because any of you guys that were around for the Ronnie O'Neill discussion in that sentencing phase, when you talk about aggravating factors, those are aggravating factors. Here, there may have been some too, okay? So the maximum was 40 years. Prosecutors were asking for 30 years. The defense attorneys were asking for time served and probation. I don't think anybody thought that was realistic, okay? But that's what they were asking for. They felt like that was their best argument, best route to go. Derek Chauvin's been punished enough is what they were arguing, things like that. So as the sentencing hearing began, we heard from the prosecution gets to go first, as always, and we heard some just gripping testimony, okay? George Floyd's daughter saying, I ask about him all the time. I miss him. I would tell him that I love him if I could talk to him now. We heard from a bunch of family members from George Floyd, a couple of his brothers and his cousins that said things like, I don't like you very much, Derek Chauvin, but I love you. And even though you did this to my family, how would you feel if I did this to your brother? You'd be angry at me too. Another one of the brothers said, we want the absolute maximum. The family, the victims, we are asking for the maximum, not just some slap on the wrist. We don't want that anymore. We can't take another one of those. It's got to be the maximum, basically, is what the victims were talking about in all the testimony. Then we heard from testimony from the most important, or the biggest witness for Chauvin was his mother, who said, he's a good man. I still believe he's innocent. Looked over at him and said, I still believe you're innocent. And I never will stop believing that you're innocent, which was pretty, emotional testimony. And then Chauvin also made a statement. And let's listen to the statement, and then we can kind of break it down together. Let me figure out how to do this again. Share screen. Let's see here.
So Chauvin, this is your opportunity if you wish to give any input to the court. And so I turn it over to you and your attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest. And I hope things will give you some peace of mind. Thank you.
So that's what he said. And it was kind of cryptic. It was kind of weird. I think that we know the reason why he couldn't say too much, right? And he even said some other legal matters. We did a whole video where my dad actually broke down the federal charges that can be coming, how you have federal charges at the same time as state charges, how they're different. But anything he would have said in this sentencing hearing could have been used against him in the federal case. So that's probably why he didn't want to say too much. But I did think it was interesting. He gave that statement. He did give them his condolences, and he said there'd be more information that would give them peace in the future. I'm not really sure what that means, but you guys can let me know if you have some idea of what that means. So let's get into what the actual verdict was. The judge ended up taking all this under consideration for about 15 or 20 minutes. He went out, he came back in, and he sentenced Derek Chauvin to 22 and a half years. Which is interesting. My dad projected that it would be 25 years. So that's pretty spot on. My dad projected it would be less than the max. It would be less than what the prosecutor was actually asking for, but more than what the defense attorneys were asking for. And that's right where it landed, in that 22.5-year range. Okay, so let me know, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a fair number? Do you think it's too much, too little, now that you know what the prosecutors were asking for? Do you know what, now that you know what the defense attorneys were asking for, and you know what the max was, you know what the victims were asking for, where do you think 22.5 years comes in? Do you think it's splitting the baby? It's a little more than half of 40 years. And this is all an interesting part of the process, right? That the judge makes this decision, because the jury was in and out pretty quick with their guilty verdict on all counts. Do you think this shows the judge agreed? Not? What do you think? I do think he takes into account the fact that he was a law enforcement officer, a public servant, no prior criminal history, or all things that work in Derek Chauvin's favor. I've seen some news stations already saying it was a kick to the gut, a gut punch. You can't believe he got this slap on the wrist. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to go to prison for 22.5 years. I would not call that a slap on the wrist. Definitely wasn't the maximum, but he's got a lot of mitigating factors, even though he is guilty of killing someone, right? There's not much worse than that, but he did not get the maximum. So the judge obviously didn't think this was the worst of the worst. And he wasn't even charged with first-degree murder, so that's something to take into account as well. But he definitely did not get anywhere near the maximum. He barely got more than half. Now, if you do look, there are some non-violent drug crimes that get this much. In Florida, we have a 10-20 life for multiple crimes, or crimes that have a gun involved, that are aggravations, things like that. So, I mean, it's a lot of time, 22.5 years, but at the same time, it could have been a lot worse. And what's interesting about this too is Derek Chauvin's going to continue to appeal this case. He's going to appeal this sentence. He's going to appeal the trial. If he thinks this is just a slap on the wrist, we'll know that, because he'll stop his appeals and he'll just take it, do his 22 years. And then I think he's like 45 years old, and he may actually get out of prison one day on good behavior when he's in his 60s. So, that is something that's possible as well. If he doesn't want to appeal it, he can just do his sentence straight and get out and still have some sort of life in the future. So that's something to consider. I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think he's going to stop his appeals. I think he's going to continue to appeal to try to overturn that verdict and get out of this sentence, or lessen this sentence, because you can not only appeal the case and the trial, you can also appeal the sentence. So I think that is something that is to come as well. So I think we learned a lot today, and we saw that the judge was not going to hammer as much. Again, I keep reverting back to the Ronnie O'Neal trial. The jury's making that decision, and if they follow a straight line from how they determined guilty on all counts so quickly, I expect the death penalty, the max in that case. In this case, it wasn't the jury. I think the jury probably would have given him more than 22.5 years. What do you guys think? Do you think the jury would have given more or less? So I'm here. I do these lives. I like to have everybody on here while I do them so we can get some live interaction. So get in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on the 22.5-year sentence. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll get to those. Take a second, like the video if you can, and subscribe to our page. We're doing lots of lives now. I don't expect us to do this many lives every week. It just happens that a lot of news popped up today, or this week, I should say, with the Ronnie O'Neal trial and now the Chauvin sentencing. So make sure you subscribe to our page. Turn on the alerts so you can get the reminders whenever we do these lives, so you can be part of this conversation, because I love hearing from you guys, because you could be on juries like this. You could make decisions like were made in this case and the Ronnie O'Neal trial. So I want to hear what you think. Also, let me know, do you think it's fair that the judge makes the sentencing decision, or do you think the jury of the defendant's peers in this case should be the ones making the sentencing decision? Let's see what comments and questions are coming through in the chat here. So BL, I am bothered by what Chauvin said, very cryptic, and his mother, well, I will zip it. So Veronica Burgess, I wonder what he meant when he said he won't say much because of future legal concerns and info that will come, that will give the family peace. I don't know what he's talking about information that will give the family peace, but I think the legal concerns he has are the federal criminal charges that are looming against Derek Chauvin. He doesn't want to say, I'm sorry for what I did, or I'm sorry for what I did to George Floyd, or anything like that, because that can be used against him in future criminal trials that may come. Yeah, I don't know what info will come out and give the family peace. Some arguments here, as to be expected. Let me see. Yes, so Babbitt, the Floyd family did ask for the max sentence, which was 40 years, and the judge only gave 22 and a half. So Butterfly, what about the juror that was at, I don't think he was at a BLM riot. He was at an MLK march. And Derek Chauvin's lawyers did file a motion for new trial based on this, saying it was juror misconduct and that he lied on his jury questionnaire, and the judge denied that motion. So that was brought to the judge's attention, and the judge denied that motion. All right, so 25 Cookie Monster. I think Chauvin got what he deserved. So is that just being convicted, or do you mean the 22 and a half years? Do you think that's a fair sentence for what he did and what he's convicted of and the facts surrounding it, or are you just saying he deserved to be guilty? A lot of people kind of just commenting on the trial itself. Jurors already decided that he was guilty. Yeah, okay, so, okay, I think Priscilla's talking about the fact that it's a fact now. It's a legal fact that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd, right? We can still argue about it if we want. People cannot believe it, but legally it is a fact. He has been convicted of it. And, you know, that's why he's getting sentenced today. Veronica Burgess, they went in hard on him with the verdict. I agree, guilty on all counts, only a couple hours of deliberation. All right, Butterfly, I thought 20 years, but 15 would have been reasonable. So why do you think 15 would have been reasonable? I don't even remember what my guess was. I probably would have guessed closer to 30 or 40. I mean, I probably would not have guessed more than 30, because even though the victims were asking for 40, in some states like Florida are actually trying to put in laws where the victims have more say in the sentencing and in the deals that are given in these criminal cases. So I do think the victims' voices mattered a lot, and the victim's family in this case. But I probably would have guessed 30 years, since that's what prosecutors were asking for. I would not have guessed 40. But why did you think 20? You think just splitting the baby between 0 and 40? It seems like the judge didn't want to do that, didn't want to just go right in, cutting it in half, whatever the maximum could have been. But instead, he went a little more than that with 22 and a half. Why even say that? I mean, IB Elf, a couple of reasons. Number one, I realize he's one of the most hated men in America, but maybe he did want to give condolences to the Floyd family, and he's never really had the opportunity to do that. Because once you have criminal charges or be investigated, he knows as well as anyone, you don't come out and say stuff. You don't make statements. So maybe he was just using the opportunity to really give his condolences to them. But also, it's part of the process, and maybe he was hoping that if the judge saw that he did that, he would get a lighter sentence. So there's a couple of reasons for that. All right, some arguments factually about the trial. I'm not going to get into it at this point. All right, so Sharon Zielinski said 40 years. So you think he should have gotten the max? Is that based on just the facts? Is that based on what the victim said? Do you think the judge should have gone above and beyond even what the prosecutors were asking? That's very unusual, I'll tell you, for them to go above what it has happened. But a lot of times that gets overturned. That's the type of sentence that gets overturned in an appeal if the judge goes above even what the prosecutors are asking for. Now, they're not bound by that at all, but it's very unusual. All right. Kingdom Harbinger Ministries also said he should have been given the max. Let's see here. So here's Babbitt. To be completely honest, it's hard for me to even look at this case analytically in the slightest because it becomes so painfully political. You know what? I actually think this is, people may disagree with me as a lawyer. This is a good take, in my opinion. When things become so overly political, it really clouds people's judgments and thoughts. I mean, I try to stay away from the political arguments around this and just look at it as a case. You know, I mean, that's really been hard with this one, which is why it's, you know, hasn't gotten as much coverage on our channel as the other ones, because people think everything comes from a political angle, when in reality, there are just legal parts of the case, and this is one of them. He was sentenced. He was sentenced today within the guidelines, within whatever, right in the middle, basically, of what everyone was asking. And, you know, this is interesting stuff to think about. It's going to be precedent for future cases. Like, if we're going to continue to prosecute cops that are killing people on the streets, especially if it's a situation like this where the jury finds them to break protocol, unnecessary force, and actually have a second-degree murder type of charge that they're convicted with, this sentence is going to be something we look at in the future when we look at how other cops, or even, you know, people in position of authority that commit these murders, this is going to set a precedent to how they're sentenced. So I think it's important, and it's going to be a sentence compared to a lot of other crimes, I think, in our history. You know, Vicky, I don't know the answer to that in Minnesota, what the rules are. Add 22 years, how old will you be? I'm not sure if you're talking to somebody else, but Chauvin, I believe, is 45. So 22 years, he'll be in his late 60s. So he could potentially get out. I mean, that's something to consider with the 22-year sentence. Again, with the judge giving a 40-year-old 40 years, basically a life sentence. So I think that's what Floyd's family's thinking of. That's probably what people are thinking of here. So, you know, we'll see what actually happens. So here we go. Billy, the judge said he already prepared a 22-page memorandum explaining his decision for sentencing. Yes, that's something that always comes out. So we'll get to see exactly why the judge sentenced him the way that he did. From our perspective here, we just have the 22 and a half years. And when we're looking at just the optics and what everybody was asking for, it looks like something pretty close to the middle of the range of potential outcomes. So no, Billy, does this mean that he did not take into consideration what was said today, or did he possibly go back in the chambers and modify his sentence during the 15-minute break? So here's what I'll tell you. In sentencing phases, when this happens in the trial, it's so long after the trial, right? It's not like the Ronnie O'Neill case where they do the sentencing trial right, you know, the next day. But with this situation, both lawyers have had an opportunity to already present handwritten letters, sentencing memorandums, asking the judge and explain to the judge their position. So the judge probably had 99% of this information or knew what was coming in the sentencing hearing. So what judges usually do is they review all that information. They come up with probably a range. They think it's going to be, maybe he had somewhere between 20 and 30 years. Maybe that's what he was thinking. And after hearing all the information, he thought he needed to tack on a couple extra years to that 20 years. Maybe he was thinking 30, and he said, based on the information at the hearing, he dropped it down to 22 and a half. The judge probably had a range of outcomes in his head, and he took into consideration everything that was said in the sentencing hearing, went back for 15 to 20 minutes. When it's a one-man show and you're the only person making the decision, there's not 11 other jurors or a 3-judge panel. There's not a lot of discussion that has to take place. So you go back, you look at your notes from the hearing, you review everything that you had ready and prepared, and you make your decision there, right? There's nothing worse than a judge that can't make a decision. There's nothing worse than a judge that takes 6. We have cases where we'll file a motion and it takes 6 months for the judge to make a decision, and that's horrible. The case is at a standstill. The clients are in limbo. The lawyers are sitting here waiting. We can't make our next move till we know how to judge rules. That's the worst. So this judge took all the information that he had already been prepared and sent to him, reviewed it, took the information he learned in the sentencing hearing, came down and gave us his decision. So Natalie, 80%, that's what it would be in Florida, yeah, of the 22 and a half years. So Daisy, blessed, he'll be dead by then. I assume you mean because of some of the contact that happens in prisons. So IB Elf, these were broken down at length. I actually don't have as much time as I usually have tonight. I like to stay on here for an hour plus. Tonight, I probably only have 45 minutes total, so I maybe have another 15, 20 minutes to try to get through as many questions as I can. So make sure you get them in the chat now if you have questions. but he's facing federal criminal charges. And we did a whole video where my dad, who practices a ton of federal criminal work all across the country, breaks down exactly how that happens and what charges he's facing. So hit up our YouTube page and make sure you subscribe and like that video as well, so you can break down all the charges that he's looking at. I think he will get out early. Usually they do if they're on good behavior, but some people think that it's not going to go well for him in prison. So Aqua Rose, I agree, Stacy. Where are the statutes for people who lived a normal life and never commit a crime? I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you mean prior to being convicted of a crime, that is built into the sentencing, that is built into the statutes, where you do, that's a mitigating circumstance. I mean, you bring down the sentence in prison if you've lived a normal life with no crimes. Okay, here we go. Great. IBL, if the judge said the sentence was determined by law alone, no emotion involved. Every judge will say that about every sentencing, because it is going against the law to let emotion come in. And maybe this is the judge showing his hand a little bit that he agrees with the jury. This conviction was correct, but it wasn't enough to give the maximum amount. So maybe the judge is kind of giving us his opinion on, after listening to the witnesses, because the judge, don't forget, the judge was there throughout the entire trial. He saw all the evidence. He listened to all the testimony. He saw the witnesses. He knows everything about the case and more, because the judge is in the room where the jury's not, where maybe some other prejudicial information came out about Derek Chauvin, maybe some things he considered about George Floyd, things like that. The judge has even more information than the jury does to make this determination of what the sentence length will be. Sharon, again, voting for 40 years. Okay. So Vicky McNamara, I think the jury would have given more. They came to a decision fast. I agree with you. I think the jury would have given more in this case. I think they would have given 40. I think they would have given as much as they could. Chris Moreland saying the jury was emotional, though. Maybe, I don't know. They were instructed not to bring emotion, sympathy, empathy, anything like that into the verdict. So I don't know. Some other people saying a BLM activist was on the jury. So we'll go mentally insane individual. Not a great start if that's your name to start your comments, but the jury would have given a lot more BLM activists. I don't necessarily know that there was a BLM activist, and it obviously was not an instant mistrial because they found out about it. Judge denied motion for new trial. Whoops. So Cyrus Cherry says, BS, this trial was so wrong on so many levels. I don't know which way you're meaning it was wrong, but let us know what was wrong about it. Man, this chat thing really gets away from me here. So I don't know, Charmax, how long he'll be in protective custody. I don't think he's going to go into Gen Pop. I think they'll file appropriate motions to keep him in solitary, which can make you go crazy. All right, Natalie, I 100% want the judge deciding how hard to throw the book at me. I'm not leaving that up to a jury. My peers, guilt or innocence should be a collaborative decision. I agree with that, because the judge can sometimes fix runaway juries, right? If they think a jury was emotional, if they think a jury went too hard, they can affect that in the sentencing phase. So Joyce Ackerman, has the jury decided on death penalty for Ronnie O'Neal? Not that I have seen yet. If it happens, don't tell me. I'm going to save that reaction for another time. So make sure you subscribe to the page so when I do, we can talk about that together as well. So IBL, if he didn't even apologize, yeah, but you've got to remember other federal potential criminal charges are looming. So if he apologized and admitted doing anything wrong, that would be used against him in the future. If you mean the Chris Moreland, could he appeal to the Supreme Court? The United States Supreme Court, potentially, maybe, not guaranteed. Animal Science TV, 22 years, a lot more than 0 paid leave could have happened. Why do you people think he was innocent? Some people, whatever, they're arguing in here that he was innocent. At this point, he was legally guilty. So not a lot of argument there, but I agree. 22 years is a long time. Okay, max, here we go. He's very disappointed with the judge, should get max 30 years. So 30 years wasn't the max, but that's what the prosecutors were arguing for, or were asking for. Some people saying they were really torn on this case. Hello, Brianna. They did actually get a $27 million settlement. That is true. Yeah, Natalie. So sentencing requires a more nuanced understanding of the law. Correct. To keep it in the parameters and, like I said, in line with other similar cases. So Billy Jones, 22 years is fine. It's not like he shot him and killed him. Some people agree, some don't, right? Some people think this is worse than shooting and killing somebody. One of his family members said, I think every day about how he was tortured to death, being suffocated with somebody kneeling on his back, neck area. Okay, so IBL, so you understand now not admitting the guilt. Okay. Requiem Dream, the sentence was 22 and a half years. Just a quick recap. The maximum was 40. Prosecutors asked for 30. Chauvin's lawyers asked for time served and probation, so 0 extra years. Judge went a little more than the middle of 0 and 40 at 22 and a half years. He showed no remorse. I mean, he gave condolences. I agree. He didn't say he was sorry, but again, there's reasons for that because of the future federal crimes that could come down. So Aqua Rose says 22 years is a little far. Where would you have gone? 10, 15? I mean, I assume more than time served, which is about just over a year. So Tom Sterling, 22 and a half years. Casey Anthony says hi. I do think that's something that some people are missing, saying that this is a kick to the gut. This is a slap on the wrist. I mean, if he goes free, that's the miserable slap on the wrist. 22 and a half years is still a long time. I am not away from the firm. I'm sitting in my office right now. It's the end of the day on a Friday. It's about 5 o'clock. And when news like this comes down, I know people are going to want to talk about it, so we jump on here to talk about it as much as we can. Don't understand. He will only do 10 of 22. Not far disappointed with the judge. I'm not sure what that means. Wow. Sharon, I have not heard this question before. Because this is political, do you think the next Republican president will pardon Chauvin? I feel confidently that the answer to that question is no. I think there's only one person in the world that if they became president would even consider it, and I don't foresee him being president again, but I could be wrong. Butterfly, 22 pages, 22 years. Probably just coincidence. So, melanated Blancos, good, but he should have gotten the needle. That's the best sentence for Derek, chauvinistic. Okay, so some people think it should have been even worse than what the max was. Guidelines in terms of sentencing was the maximum was 40 years. Brianna, I haven't seen that yet, what O'Neill's gotten. It's either going to be life or death, though. There's really nothing else. I do not think he will be pardoned, no. So this is interesting, and we can compare these if you guys want to. I mean, Chauvin did abuse power. He was in the situation as a police officer supposed to be protecting, but I don't think there's any argument that what Ronnie O'Neal was convicted of was much more cruel and brutal. His 9-year-old special needs daughter hatcheted to death. I can't think of much worse. So Ashley Carlin, if he was not given a harsh sentence, they would have burned the city down. People are thinking this is not a harsh sentence. The immediate reaction to this from a lot of people that were part of the push in this George Floyd situation are saying this was a slap on the wrist. This was not nearly what he should have gotten. All right, I think somebody let the cat out of the bag on Ronnie. I'm going to keep scrolling, though. We'll talk about that later. Babik, I really enjoy those. Thanks for making them. I'm in the Keys on vacation, still had to fit this in before I go on my chart. Really hoping for only alive in the future. We'll do it. We'll do it when it comes out. Thanks for joining us now. We're going to scroll through a few more here. See if we have any other questions I can answer about this. How do I feel, IBL? How do I feel as an attorney when a case doesn't go the way that I expect? So it's interesting, right? So criminal cases they feel like all or nothing, right? You either win or you lose. But a lot of times, like you're saying, you can expect the outcome and you prepare the client. So when it's surprising in the good way, you just celebrate. When it's surprising in the bad way, you look at what you can do to mitigate that, right? So what motions can you file? What went wrong in the trial? What appeals can you file? A lot of times if we lose a criminal trial, we're very, very successful in the sentencing phase. We get multiple departures. We get mitigating factors to drop the prison sentence. And that can make a big difference to where even though you lose, if the prosecutors are being unreasonable, because in criminal cases, the prosecutors have all the leverage. We can go tell them what a good guy our person is, what a mistake this was that he made, and he admits that he made it, but they're just giving us, the maximum sentence. We have no choice but to go to trial. So sometimes the trial the entire time is convincing the judge that even though he may have done this, he's sorry, he doesn't deserve the full sentence. And a lot of times we can get a lot of work done in the sentencing phase to get that dropped way down to where the client is understanding and accepts that and does his time for the crime. So Rory Hearn, 22 and a half is a long time. I agree. Oh, I meant to say when it doesn't go the way that you expect. So in civil cases, there's a number at the end. The jury actually decides damages. It's almost never exactly what we expect, right? So we always have to deal with it there, but we expect the unexpected. All right, Angel thinks 22 years seems accurate to me. My dad said 25. He knows more about this stuff than anybody, so I'm going to assume 22 and a half is not unreasonable, and it's right in the range of what was to be expected for this crime, these charges, this conviction. Yes, good behavior, you can get out early. All right, scrolling through here. See if we've got any more questions before we sign off for today. So Billy Greenfield, how do you think the defense did overall? I think they did a pretty good job considering the evidence and circumstances. I agree. I felt like he was very calm. He did his job. He pointed out things that he thought was important that helped their case. He didn't fall into, a lot of the politics. I think the defense attorney in this case did a really good job. I thought it was very technical and he was skilled and he really did the best that he could with what felt like the world against him. As criminal defense lawyers, a lot of times we say, going up against the big bad government, we're going up against the machine. We're considered the little guy in these cases. And I think he did a good job fighting against that. So Michael Magruder, if anyone else had done this, believe me, he would be in jail much longer. While I disagree with this, there have been similar cases and charges that have gotten less time. I don't know if they're just taking the political and the facts out of this case, just looking at the defendant that you take through a sentencing phase, to have somebody that's been a public servant for this many years, a police officer with, the awards or whatever that he's gotten and no prior crimes. Those are a lot of mitigating factors, and those are some of the most important ones. If you've been convicted multiple times, the judge is much more likely to throw the book at you. I'm saying across all second-degree murders, not just lesser crimes than he was convicted of, but across all second-degree murders, having someone who is a public servant and no criminal history, I think, is a mitigating factor. Yeah, Ramos, we talked about this. We don't know what the heck he was talking about, giving the family peace. So Alec, Nicole, go to our page, lawyer you know, look for the video on the federal versus the state charges in Derek Chauvin. They're all broken down there by my dad, who practices a ton of federal criminal defense law on all over the country. All right, my 2 cents. They should have given him 30 years, no parole. He is not sorry. Okay, so 30 years, they agree with what the prosecutor was asking for. So Shanny D, 22 and a half years is better than I was expecting, to be honest. Does he have to serve all 22 though? What's the max? So 22 and a half is the max, but he can get out earlier for good behavior most likely, and there'll be some type of parole in that state. I'm not sure exactly what the rules are in Minnesota. But Shanny D actually thought it was more. So were you expecting less because you thought less was warranted, or were you expecting less because you thought it would be a slap on the wrist and they didn't really want to punish him? All hail King Rose. A huge amount of defense attorneys were prosecutors first. A huge majority of defense attorneys were prosecutors first. Almost all criminal defense lawyers are either public defenders or state prosecutors before becoming criminal defense lawyers. It's a way to get a ton of trial experience, to cut your teeth and really understand what the ins and outs of the process are. And it's great if you do work for the prosecutor's office, which me and my dad both did before doing criminal defense. You really get to know what the other side is thinking, how they prepare their case, and you make a lot of friends that stay in that office forever, so you can work well together throughout the process. I think it's really important. Bernie McCabe was the state attorney here forever until he recently passed away. He and my dad started at the state attorney's office together, so it's a really cool thing to see. But yeah, a lot of us start over the prosecutor's office. So it's not a us and them, we hate each other type of thing. So Ms. Bossy, I think this was in response to that. Some criminal defense sucks. I think the prosecutors are way smarter. Most of the criminal defense lawyers were, in fact, prosecutors at one point or another. Butterfly, I absolutely agree with this. 1 day in prison would not be fun. It is not somewhere that you can just take lightly, or it's no big deal. All right, last couple minutes here. I am in Florida, Rory, Tampa Bay area. Let's see what else we got here. So Lauren S., will he be isolated in prison? I would guess yes. His lawyers can help with that. Usually, I mean, just for his physical safety, my guess would be yes. Will he be on suicide watch? That's a good question. We've had clients that have been on suicide watch. Some of them claim it because they think it's going to make life easier in prison. It's actually not. They put you in paper clothes, at least here in the prison in Pinellas County. They put you in paper clothes so you can't hang yourself with any of the clothing. You go into a cell, it's freezing, nothing is keeping you warm. People in that ward are screaming day and night, and they usually just can't wait to get out of there. But I don't know if they're going to put him on suicide watch. He usually said if he makes a cry out for that, then they will. Ms. Bossy, I will respectfully disagree with this. Hopefully, there are some bad lawyers, of course, but not all defense lawyers are bad. Ouch, come on, my 2 cents. The country's toilet? Ouch. Sean Mack, that's right. Please hit the like button, subscribe. All right. So we'll call it here about 45 minutes in. Thank you so much to everybody coming. Please subscribe to our page. Let us know what you want to hear. Let us know what you want us to react to. I knew this was going to be a big one, obviously, so I jumped on midday just to give you my reaction before I had to leave. So thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to our page, and we'll be with you next time.